Welcome everybody out there in Zoom land. My name is Eric Johnson. I'm the artistic director at Honolulu Theatre for Youth, and I'm super excited to be joined today by three members of HTY and part of the creative team that put together our project Stories of Oceania. So we have Moses and Pauai and Chesley, who are all here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves more thoroughly when they are each taking a little piece of this conversation we're going to have today.
My mom said that Oceania has many stories, more stories than you can possibly imagine.
She sat with the bird every night until she learned everything about navigating.
Home is what's up above. Home is what's down below.
The stars and the wind and the sea currents to help them find their way. I should probably tell you exactly what Oceania is.
But my mom says now is the perfect time to remember our connections. It's time to share our stories again. Share our stories. That's it.
So with that said, sharing our stories, that's really what this project is about. I'm going to turn it over to Moses. This started with one idea of sharing a story in a certain way with a certain community and transformed completely. So Moses, why don't you take it away? Tell us about the project. Tell us about how it got started and yeah, how it was developed.
Yeah, so sharing our story, sharing the stories of Oceania. For those of you who don't know what Oceania is, who haven't seen the show, and I hope you will see the show if you haven't, the way we've defined it in the show is that Oceania is the Pacific Ocean and all of the people and the islands within the Pacific Ocean. So that's what Oceania is, which is a lot of people. Now, talking about developing or creating this show, we have to go back, I think, at least 4 or 5 years. So every 4 years, the Festival of Pacific Arts takes place somewhere in Oceania, somewhere in the Pacific. So in 2008, I went to the Festival of Pacific Arts in the Solomon Islands. And that is a huge gathering and celebration of all the people in Oceania. So this is thousands of different people that come from all over the place to share their art, to share their stories, to celebrate the connections and similarities that we have with each other, and also talk about the differences that we have between each other. So that took place in the Solomon Islands in 2008. 2012, it took place in Guam. And at the Guam celebration, at the Guam Festival of Pacific Arts, that's when it was decided that the next one to happen, which would be 2020, would take place in Hawaiʻi for the very first time. So we were going to have this huge celebration of all the people of Oceania right here in Hawaiʻi. And when we heard that in 2012, we decided at HTY that we were going to create a show to go along with that, to be a part of that celebration. And that's sort of how we work at HTY. We come up with an idea for a show 4 years sometimes before the show even happens, right? And then we kind of put it aside and we don't think about it for a little while. Then when it gets closer to the time when the show is going to happen, we start working on it. We start researching it. We start talking and having conversations about it, which is how this was supposed to have taken place. But then the pandemic happened, right? And so we didn't even know if we were going to do the show or not, because live theater just wasn't happening in 2020. But then, as Eric said, we sort of switched to creating shows in a different way. So it's not live shows. We create digital shows that can be seen on your computer screens. And we decided, hey, we're going to do Stories of Oceania. Great. Now what do we do? Because we didn't have, as easy, we couldn't really contact as many people as we wanted to in terms of the people from the many different places of Oceania. And we couldn't meet with them in the way that we wanted to meet with them, even though we did make use of Zoom. So what we did, and what we sort of decided from the beginning anyway, was to focus as much as we can on our little portion of Oceania, which is Hawaiʻi, because this piece was created by the four of us. I was sort of the lead writer, but it was myself, Po'ai, Maki'ile, who's not here, and Sean Chu also. So the four Hawaiians telling the stories about all of Oceania. So we don't come from all of Oceania, we just come from this little part of Oceania. So we wanted to kind of focus on or at least tell the story more or less from our point of view, our perspective, which is what we ended up doing. And then finding really creative ways to do that in a digital way, which Chesley is going to talk about in a little bit. But that's sort of how we ended up moving forward and creating this piece that we're very proud of. And again, I hope you're able to take a look at it. And yeah, that's sort of in a nutshell how this piece came to be.
Pula, Ali, Yokwe, Yaurana, Talofa, Ranani, Kia ora, Aloha. 8. I now know 8 ways to say hello. Fijian, Palauan, Marshallese, Tahitian, Samoan, Chukis, Maori, and of course, Hawaiian. I'm doing great, but I've still got a long way to go. So many hellos! Should probably explain exactly what it is that I'm doing here, and more importantly, why. I should probably also introduce myself. My name is Kapili, and I've committed myself to memorizing every possible way of saying hello in Oceania. I should probably tell you exactly what Oceania is. Oceania is kind of complex and pretty hard to fully explain, but I'll do my best to give you a good definition. Oceania is the Pacific Ocean and the people that live in it. That didn't sound very complex, did it? But it is. It really, really is. Trust me. But before I get into just how complex Oceania is, I should probably tell you about why I decided to give myself the task of learning all the different greetings of Oceania. It's because
some aesthetic possibilities, and you see that the film was definitely shot in a very aggressive style in some ways. So I'd love to. How did you figure it out, Jess? How did you decide how this film was going to be shot and where theater and film kind of intersects?
Yeah. So I've sort of toggled between film and theater for most of my career and in my education. I was at HTY for quite a while as a designer pre-pandemic and kept pushing us towards more media content because I have a master's in scenic design, but before that I was a film school dropout. And so there was the part of me that always wanted to return to that and to find ways to blend those two worlds. And actually, I was attempting to do a PhD when the pandemic hit, and in my research topic was actually trying to combine some theater and film and research. So anyway, when HTY started doing this, I knew I had to come back and get involved. So this was the second of the 2 digital captures that I worked on after Duke. And Duke was a show that already existed. So we learned a lot. I mean, that was a one-man show with Moses that we had staged several times, and so we knew it well. But we started finding some interesting things in the way we shot it. And when this show then came up next, we really wanted to push those even further and see how we could take that aesthetic for a show that had never existed as a stage show. And so without those thoughts, but create a piece that was still a theatrical piece, just a theatrical piece that was made for a camera. So I'd like to throw it back to when I was a film student 20 odd years ago, freshman in the Intro to Film Studies class. And the professor shows a clip from The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And it's a scene in a saloon and lots of stuff going on. And the scene ends and he goes, okay, describe the saloon to me, or, you know, what's the map of the saloon? And like some kids came up and did the chalkboard, and like, you knew that he wanted something specific and no one was going to give it to him. And then after he let some people try, he's like, okay, there is no saloon. And the kid in front of me, dressed like Indiana Jones, sitting in class reading manga all the time, goes, oh, great, thanks for getting all existential on us. And, you know, his point about there is no geography in film except like what you create through cuts and through eye lines and through the grammar of film, like, it was a good lesson, but I don't know that it would have stuck with me without Indiana Jones in front of me, like labeling it existentialism. So for whatever, that's been kicking around in my head for 20 some years. And so I started thinking, like, you know, the beautiful thing about theater is that the world is what you create and an object is what you say it is. And so we could really push that, like, by building everything around the table and the table becoming the world. But then you take that and you marry it to this power of film, where shot or bits of a scene can be shot in 3 different corners of the world. And if you follow film grammar and edit together, you would never know, because the geography is created in the edit. And so that was really what we talked about pushing in this production, of like, to create this theatrical piece, but where the audience was the camera rather than the audience.
My name is Pun, and I like to draw pictures of my home. For as long as I can remember, I have always looked up. Looked up at my mother when I was born, looked up to my father for help, and looked up to the stars. The stars make such beautiful patterns. Looking up always made me feel safe. Looking up felt like home. But then when I was 6, my parents decided to move to Hawaii, so we flew on an airplane. I'd never been so high before. We were above the trees, above the clouds. We were closer to the stars. But when I looked out the window, all I wanted to do was look at Satawal. The shape of it in the water. The patterns that the waves made around it. I waited my whole life to be up, and when I finally was, all I wanted to do was look down. Home. When we first got to Hawaii, I was a little scared. Instead of bird sounds and waves, I heard car horns and buses. Instead of smelling roasted breadfruit and fish all the time, I smelled exhaust from engines. And instead of trees covered with leaves, I saw telephone poles with wires coming out of them. Everything was so different. But different isn't always bad. I started drawing things from my new home right next to things from my home in Satawal. I drew the apartment building that we live in now next to our house on Satawal. A lot of work went into building that house, and many hands from the community helped to cut down the trees and bundle the leaves for the roof. I drew a picture of my favorite place to eat, right next to my dad making my favorite food, pounded breadfruit. There are no restaurants on Satawal, so food making is a big part of daily life. Lots of people gather to cook and prepare things like breadfruit, taro, and fish. And there's always lots of singing and joke telling and laughing. Here's a picture of how we got around. My mom bought our Toyota car so we can travel the whole island. But on Satawal, the island is so small that you can walk wherever you need to go, so no one has a car. And if we want to travel far, we use canoes. The navigators of Satawal can find any island anywhere. But when it came to Hawaii, I found out just how good they really are. People here say that our navigators are some of the best navigators in the whole entire world. I knew they were good, but wow, hearing that made me so proud to be from Satawal. And it made me miss it. My dad missed Satawal too, a lot. He became concerned that I was forgetting our language and our customs. My mom felt we could find success here on this more westernized island, and it would be better for all of us. Mom decided to stay. Dad decided to go back. At first, I was angry and I tore their picture in half. If Mom was here and Dad was in Satawal, where did I belong? But then I started to look back on these drawings, these pictures of home. And then I realized something. For me, home is what's up above. Home is what's down below. And home is what's in between. All at the same time.
So I'd love to turn it over to Pawai and just talk a little bit about the sort of creative process, the what devising is like, and how it played out here.
Thank you. Yeah. Aloha. My name is Pawai, and I was one of the co-creators of this and acted in this show. And Eric just said what we use a very unique process of writing and creating at Honolulu Theatre for Youth of devising, or at least other people say it's unique. I am relatively new to HTY, and most of my experience of creating anything with HTY has been a devising of a play, which I think is a great way to tell stories. And what that means by devising is that it's a group of us. We're all writing multiple portions, multiple pieces, and we come together and read our work together and help each other edit. And what's really neat about it, especially in a story like this, which is so vast. My cat wants to join when she hears me talk, sorry. There are so many stories. There's so many perspectives to come from. And so having a large group of people or more than just yourself to write and create really allows for a vast array of story, not just in the telling of the story that's being told, but how it's told. So when you watch this show and you experience it, you'll see that even the stories that are being told are told in different ways. There's a music video, there's a story that's told like a traditional legend, there's the story of Pun, which is all through artwork and really reads like a poem. So there are all these different styles that came together with the idea of devising, which is one of the amazing things about devising. And my personal favorite thing that occurred while working on this piece is that very early on when we decided we were going to do this was the time we were going to do it. And even though the world was so different and we were having to do all of these meetings via Zoom, something that HTY has always practiced, especially with the devising of a play, is to reach out to experts, to really reach out to the community of the story that we are working on. And so we had these meetings on Zoom with members of our Oceania community that included Uncle Vilsoni, who was just such an amazing storyteller and defender of coconuts and filmmaker, amazing human. We had Peter Tau of Tau Dance with us. We had Kumu Hailiopua and Auntie Meleana Meyer, to name a few of the people that jumped in with us, just to have these early conversations about what is it that we're doing and why. And that was amazing, because not only were we able to work as youngins, able to work with these like veterans of creating stories. But we also had an opportunity to just hang out with each other, even in a virtual space, to hang out with other creators within Oceania, which was so cathartic, I think was one of the words we used to describe it later. So that's one of the really neat things about creating things, creating this particular piece or writing in this style, this collaborative style, is that you get to work with a lot of people. Some of the tough things and learning while you write is we wrote a lot. We wrote a lot. There is a Google Drive of folders just bursting with the beginning of scenes or full written scenes that were not used, which is fine. And it was an amazing experience because it allowed just this creative, just writing, just pouring out of ideas. And I think as a very beginner writer, this was the beginning of my writing career, it was an amazing opportunity to help me hone in my voice. So that's one of the great benefits, I think, of writing collaboratively.
Is that there has been a real interest. This was a project that was shared at a National Theater conference for theaters for young audiences. There was it was chosen as one of a handful of digital pieces that was shared at the conference. And then from there, people have really fallen in love with it and have really shown a keen interest in this piece, both here in Hawaii and other places. It's going to be the centerpiece of a festival about Pacific Island artistic work in Oregon in November for families and to zoom in and watch the production. And then these guys will be doing more panel discussions then. And it's also been chosen to be part of a series at the New Victory Theater, which is a Broadway house actually in New York on 42nd Street, which is doing a series of digital work. So through those efforts, it's going to go out and be, it's already played somewhat in different communities across the United States, and it's going to continue to tour digitally throughout the entire United States, which is really exciting to think about being able to share these stories that we built so specifically about this place that in some ways that has made it universal. And I think the curiosity of communities that maybe don't know about Hawaii, or the communities we're talking about in the piece have been really interested in the work. So yeah, we'll if you're connected to the HTY social media empire, you will continue to hear updates around stories of Oceania. If you happen to be a teacher, this is my shameless plug. If you happen to be a teacher, we'd love to have this story become a part of your classroom. We've got a lot of educational resources that go alongside it and are connected to it. And even if you're just a part of a community group or would like to use this video in some way, we encourage you to reach out to us and be a part of helping spread the stories. I thought it might be fun to kind of have the team tell you a little bit about upcoming technology work that we're doing, give you some inside scoops into some of the things that we're about to create right now, because, of course, having done TV now for a year, we want to see what other kind of trouble we can get into. So I thought maybe I've got each of the team members I've asked to talk a little bit about a project that we're working on. So Moses, why don't you tell us a little something about where we're gonna be in April?
Yeah, so we are we're creating a show. That one of our shows is called Imi Aloa'a, which translates to I guess search and find, and it is a theatrical experience that will be experienced using augmented reality. and it's pretty cool, but we're still figuring out exactly how to do theater using augmented reality, and it's fun. We're meeting with a bunch of different tech people, and and trying out different augmented reality things like Pokemon Go, which I did for the first time the other day and it blew my mind. And we're gonna kind of use some of those things that you might experience on a game like that, and have an experience that you can have on your device, and it's a piece that focuses on the we are a theater of place, and so we're starting. It's going to be the place where we're situated, downtown Honolulu, and the different bahipana, or the storied places around our theater, and an exploration of the different mo'olelo that are there.